Welcome to the Supreme Grammar Podcast, where you can learn to write like a Supreme Court justice, with me, Jill Barton. On this episode, I've asked our AI hosts to describe everything legal writers need to know about the most misused punctuation mark out there, commas. Let's listen in.
Welcome to The Deep Dive, where we unpack the essentials to boost your knowledge fast. Today, we're zeroing in on something really fundamental for writers, especially legal writers. Commas.
Right. And not just, getting them technically correct, according to some old grammar book. We're looking at how using commas helps with clarity, sure, but also with the rhythm of your sentences.
That rhythm, or cadence, as Jill Barton calls it, in The Supreme Guide to Writing.
Exactly. We're drawing heavily on chapter 4 of her book today. And her main point is pretty powerful. Use a comma when you need one, either for clarity or for that cadence. It's about being intentional.
Intentional choices. And sometimes those choices or mistakes have had huge consequences, haven't they?
Oh, absolutely. There's that classic story about the 1872 tariff law. A misplaced comma, apparently between fruit and plants, ended up costing the government something like $40 million back then.
Yeah.
That's serious money.
Wow. Okay, so precision matters.
It really does. Or think of someone like Oscar Wilde, supposedly spending ages deciding whether to put a comma in or take it out. It shows the power packed into that tiny mark.
So commas aren't just like grammatical dust bunnies we need to sweep up. They actively shape meaning.
Precisely. And we'll even look at how Supreme Court justices handle them. They're masters of the craft, but even they sometimes follow the old rules and sometimes, bend them.
Bend them for a reason, presumably. For clarity or cadence.
That's the idea. Understanding these principles, the why behind the comma, will really help you become a more effective, more modern writer.
Okay, let's dive into that main principle from Barton again. Use a comma when clarity or cadence compel one. It sounds less like a rigid rule and more like a guiding philosophy.
It really is. Think of it as the comma's job. Make things clear, control the pace. Traditional rules usually help with that, but skilled writers understand the goal is clarity and flow.
And they adapt the rules to meet that goal.
Exactly. Sometimes your ear or the need for absolute, undeniable clarity overrides a textbook rule.
So where did the justices, these expert writers, consistently stick to the traditional rules? Any non-negotiables?
One big one is using a comma before short conjunctions. Words like and, but, or, nor, so, yet. For if they connect two independent clauses.
Okay, refresh us. Independent clauses are basically complete sentences that could stand alone, right?
Spot on. Two separate thoughts linked by one of those little words.
The chapter has good examples, like warts dot its back and dark spots cover its entire body. Two distinct ideas, comma before the and.
Perfect. Or, Neves approached Bartlett to explain the situation, but Bartlett was highly intoxicated and yelled at him to leave. Comma before but.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And that is true of most unconstitutional motive claims, yet we generally trust that courts are up to the task of managing them. Comma before yet.
Yep. So the takeaway is pretty clear. Two complete thoughts linked by one of those 7 short conjunctions. Put a comma before the conjunction. Standard practice. Very reliable.
Okay, but now for the twist. The chapter says the justices don't always follow the common advice for sentences with just one subject, but 2 verbs, like he went to the store and bought milk.
Yes. This is where cadence really comes into play. Traditional grammar often says no comma before and. In that structure, 1 subject, 2 actions. But the justices, they do sometimes use a comma there.
Wow.
Only if they want to pause. If they want to separate those 2 actions slightly, maybe for emphasis or just to control the writing rhythm, it's purely stylistic based on the desired cadence.
So it's not about grammar correctness in that case, but about effect.
Precisely. It shows they're thinking about how the sentence sounds and feels to the reader, not just checking boxes in a rule book.
Can we see some examples of this flexibility?
Sure. Look at this. He had sustained no injuries during the episode and was released a few hours later. See? No comma before and. Flows smoothly.
Okay, straightforward.
Now compare it to, he denies being aggressive and claims that he stood close to wait only in an effort to speak over the loud background music.
Ah, I see it. There's a comma before and claims. It does create a little pause there.
Right. It subtly separates the denial from the claim, maybe gives that second part a bit more weight, as you said before.
Interesting. More examples.
Yep. At that point, a judge could try and convict him and then sentence him to pretty much anything. Comma before and then. It breaks up that sequence of potential actions.
Okay. And another one with but. The parties dispute certain details, but agree on the general course of events, some of which were captured on video. Comma before but.
Yes, emphasizing the contrast there. And again, Wall Street canceled, but continued to display articles. Comma before but, same reason, likely.
But sometimes they don't use the comma in similar spots.
Correct. Look at this. We should not purport to advise Congress, nor give our blessing to hypothetical statutes. No comma before nor still reads perfectly clearly.
Or this one, the dissent commits the same interpretive error. It focuses on Campbell's paraphrase, yet ignores the rest of that decision's careful reasoning. Here, there is a comma before yet.
Right, drawing attention to that contrast again, it makes the ignoring part stand out a bit more.
And one more without. Petitioners argue that. Respondents thought that their claims were inaccurate, yet submitted them anyway. No comma before yet.
So you see the pattern, or rather the lack of a rigid one. They use the comma in this one subject-to-verb structure when they want the pause. It's all about controlling the cadence.
Got it. Okay, moving on. What about commas after introductory bits, words, phrases, clauses at the start of the sentence?
Yeah, this is another area where that clarity or cadence principle really shines. Forget strict rules about counting words in the introduction.
So no use a comma after 5 words kind of rule.
Not really, not for the justices, according to Barton. They use a comma if the introduction needs separating for clarity, or if they want to create a pause before the main part of the sentence kicks in. And sometimes they skip it even when you might expect one.
Let's look at the examples. Now we are asked to imagine. No comma after now.
Right, but then, now they're at risk of being held responsible. Comma after now.
Why the difference, do you think?
Probably the rhythm. In that second one, the comma gives a slight pause, maybe emphasizes the uh-oh, here's the consequence feeling of what follows, a little breath before the main point.
Makes sense. Here's another pair. Then a strange thing happened. No comma.
Smooth flow.
Versus then, in 1939, Sanger initiated the Negro Project. Comma after then.
In that second case, the comma helps set off the introductory time element in 1939 from the main clause. It just makes it a bit easier to read with that extra detail right after then.
Okay. Similar variations with here.
Yeah.
Here it's clear that the Crow tribe, no comma. But here, West Virginia expressly affords, comma included.
Again, likely cadence or slight emphasis.
And with but. But 12 days before the execution, Mr. Bucklew filed yet another lawsuit. No comma.
Straight into the action.
But then, at Mr. Bucklew's request, this court agreed to stay his execution. Comma after but.
That comma sets off the condition at Mr. Bucklew's request, making it stand out a bit.
Yeah, it does. And there are examples with longer introductory elements too, often using commas, like third and most centrally, Congress provided. Commas setting off and most centrally for emphasis.
Right, or complex introductory clauses like, yet as the plurality acknowledges under its view, or, so, for example, in the cases described above, the government could control. Those commas just help the reader navigate the start of the sentence.
We also see commas setting off interrupting phrases within the intro or near the start. Okay, so introductory commas are flexible, driven by the writer's intent for flow and clarity.
Yeah.
But what about rules they don't bend?
Ah, the serial comma, or the Oxford comma, as many call it.
The comma before and or in a list of 3 or more things.
That's the one. And according to Barton, the justices are unanimous and unwavering on this. They always use it.
Always. No exceptions.
Whether it's a list of nouns, verbs, adjectives, whatever, if there are 3 or more items, that final comma before the and or is standard practice for them. It eliminates ambiguity, which is obviously crucial in legal writing.
Right. Avoids those situations where you wonder if the last 2 items are linked somehow. Examples.
Sure. Snowmobiles, alcohol, and freezing temperatures do not always mix well. Comma before and freezing, and the second list in that sentence. Responding to snowmobile crashes, breaking up fights, and policing underage drinking. Comma before and policing.
Clear. Another one.
History shows that governments sometimes seek to regulate our lives finely, acutely, thoroughly, and exhaustively. Comma before and exhaustively.
Got it. And one with or.
Congress also classifies crimes as felonies, misdemeanors, or infractions. Comma before or infractions. It just makes the list items clearly distinct. So for your own writing, especially anything formal or legal, the serial comma is a very safe bet.
Good to know. What other rules are pretty standard for them? Dates.
Yes, dates are straightforward. When you write the full month, day, and year, put a comma between the day number and the year.
Like October 6, 2016.
Exactly.
Locations, city, state.
Same principle. Separate the elements with a comma. City, state, country, continent.
Examples like Mobile, Alabama.
Yep. In November 2015, a local police officer in Mobile, Alabama pulled Gamble over. Comma between Mobile and Alabama. And often a comma after the state, too, if the sentence continues, just like with the date.
And Miami Beach, Florida.
Right.
Yeah.
Burgled the tongue-in-cheek restaurant in Miami Beach, Florida.
On an even larger scale, Gujarat, India.
Exactly. Construction of a power plant in Gujarat, India. Standard stuff helps keep geography clear.
Okay, now let's tackle maybe a slightly trickier area. Commas with parenthetical phrases and those non-restrictive clauses. This often involves which versus that, right?
Yes, that's a common point of confusion. Generally, a clause starting with which adds extra non-essential information. Think of it like an aside. So it gets set off with commas.
Like parentheses almost.
Kind of. Whereas a clause starting with that usually provides essential information needed to identify what you're talking about. No commas needed because it's tightly bound to the word it modifies.
The chapter mentions Justice Roberts isn't a huge fan of which sometimes.
Yeah, apparently he feels it can sometimes slow things down unnecessarily, prefers the directness of that or rephrasing to avoid the wish clause altogether if it improves the pace.
Interesting stylistic preference. Can we see the difference in action?
Sure. Non-restrictive, extra info with which. Jingles concerned a challenge to North Carolina's multi-member districting scheme, which allegedly diluted the vote of its black citizens. The main point is about the challenge. The part after the comma just adds more detail about it.
Okay, comma sets off the extra detail. Now, restrictive with that.
But it does not prohibit laws that are discriminatory, only in effect. That clause is essential here. It tells us which specific laws are not prohibited, no commas.
Makes sense. But it notes other words like when, where, who can also introduce both types.
Right. The test is always, is this information essential to identify the noun, or is it just extra commentary? If it's extra, use commas. If it's essential, don't.
And this applies to identifying information generally, not just which that clause is.
Exactly. Look at introductions of parties. Respondent Michael Luce was injured while working at petitioner BNSF Railway Company's rail yard. No commas around the names because they are essential to know who we're talking about.
But if the name is extra info,
then you use commas. Fourth Estate sued Wall Street and its owner, Gerald Burden, for copyright infringement. We know who Wall Street is. Gerald Burden is additional non-essential identifying info about the owner, so it's set off by commas.
like adding their job title or something.
Precisely. More examples of non-essential info. Respondent Moni Preep, the lead plaintiff, is a lawful permanent resident. Commas around the lead plaintiff. Or, Bartlett was arrested during Arctic Man, a week-long winter sports festival. Commas around the description of Arctic Man.
Okay, but there's a small wrinkle with phrases like in which, by which, for which.
Ah, yes. Good catch. Even though they contain which, these phrases typically don't take a preceding comma. They tend to function restrictively.
So the crime for which he has been sentenced, no comma before for which.
Correct. Or avenues by which its validity can be revisited, no comma before by which. And a civil proceeding in which Home Depot is not a plaintiff, no comma before in which. Also, if which starts a sentence, no preceding comma needed there either.
Okay, good clarification. So finally, let's loop back to that core idea, using commas for pauses with parenthetical phrases more generally.
Right. This is where Barton really stresses trusting your ear, like Justice Roberts suggests. Forget complex grammar rules about appositives or interrupters. Just think. Does this phrase feel like an aside? Do I naturally pause when I read it?
If yes, then use commas.
Pretty much. If a word or group of words interrupts the main flow of the sentence to add extra info, qualify something, or just offer a side comment and you'd naturally pause around it, commas are probably your friend. They signal that pause to the reader.
So it's about capturing that natural speaking rhythm on the page.
Exactly.
What about lists or examples within a sentence?
Commas often help there, too. For example, the landowners propose a level of 15 ppm arsenic rather than the 250 ppm level set by EPA. Comma before rather than clarifies the contrast. Or uncertainty for the state's authority over any area, ranging from zoning and taxation to family and environmental law. Comma setting off the list of examples.
And sometimes dashes do this job too, like the financial information sought here, encompassing a decade's worth of transactions, will help guide.
Yes, dashes can create a more emphatic separation for parenthetical information compared to commas. But the principle is similar, setting off an interruption. So really, for these parenthetical bits, read it aloud. Trust your ear. If you pause, a comma is often warranted.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive on commas, the big message from Barton, looking at how even Supreme Court justices write, is really about being intentional.
Absolutely. Use commas deliberately. Ask yourself, does this make it clearer? Does this help the sentence flow better, create the right pause or emphasis? It's not just about avoiding errors, it's about actively strengthening your writing.
So listen to your sentences. Pay attention to where those natural pauses fall when you read. Think about guiding your reader.
Exactly. Don't just throw commas in hoping for the best. Make conscious choices. Remember that tariff law example, tiny marks can have a huge impact. Precision matters.
It really does. So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Next time you're writing something important, maybe a legal brief, maybe just a crucial email, pause and consider your commas.
Yeah, think about how moving one, adding one, or taking one out might subtly shift the emphasis or even the core meaning. Are you using them just because you think you should, or are you using them strategically to make your point as clearly and effectively as possible? What opportunities for precision are you missing?
So using commas correctly doesn't just help you avoid a multi-million-dollar grammar mistake. It also can improve the flow and cadence of your writing. Tune into our next Supreme Grammar episode about dashes, one of the justice's favorite punctuation marks to show emphasis. And remember, you can be a great legal writer.